If you really want to start a war in the Naruto fandom, all you have to do is ask them who the strongest member of the Akatsuki is. I mean, I can't tell you how many video breakdowns, online arguments, and even fan-made animations that have come out over the years going over this topic. And I think this remains an open question even now over a decade after the end of the series, because there's a pretty clear definitive top three within the Akatsuki who scale demonstrably higher than all the other members. And that's Itachi, Pain, and Obito. The question then becomes, who is the strongest and how would you rank them from weakest to strongest? How do you even rank three shinobi whose abilities and fighting styles differ so much, and when there are so many variables to consider? Do you go by scale of raw destructive output and how much damage they can cause at once? Because if it is, then clearly Pain is the strongest. Is it by who has the most broken ability, who is generally the most difficult to deal with, and consequently has the highest ceiling in terms of shinobi they can reasonably go toe-to-toe with? Because in that case, I would give the edge to Obito. Or if you want to judge this by who is most likely to come up with a high IQ strategy to maximize their hacks abilities and pull off a win, I'm putting my money on Itachi. In my honest opinion, and I'd like to know if any of you feel the same way, I've always felt like the three of them exist in a certain gray area in terms of Naruto power scaling. A very exclusive gray area where only a handful of shinobi are relative to them in terms of power and ability. The reason this gray area is so exclusive is because I personally believe everyone ranked here scales well above the individual members of the 5 Kage, and perhaps even so as a group, but that's a conversation for another day. I also believe characters in this gray area scale slightly lower than Hokage Minato. To clarify, I'm saying that Itachi, Pain, and Orange Mask Obito all scale higher than the 5 Kage individually, but lower than Minato in his prime when he was alive. The only one I could see an argument for being equals or stronger than Minato is Obito, but Minato had to fight the Nine Tails along with Obito during their first confrontation, and immediately discovered and exploited the weakness of Kamui within seconds. So that match wasn't nearly as close as people think. And once Minato marked Obito with the Flying Raijin, it made all theoretical future encounters with him up until he became Jubito a pretty clear Minato victory since the Flying Raijin mark never disappears. If Minato and Obito ever clashed again, before he became the Ten Tails Jinchuriki, I firmly believe Obito would be at his mercy, since he could teleport to him at any time he wished to, and for 16 years, Obito never even realized it. The moment you're marked by Minato, it's basically game over for life. There's a few other characters that I put in this gray area, such as KCM Naruto version 1 and EMS Sasuke, both versions at the beginning of the war before they fully got acclimated to their new powers. I'm not sure who else I would put in this gray area. Like I said, it's pretty exclusive because there's only a handful of shinobi stronger than the 5 Kage, yet still weaker or relative to alive prime Minato. For most of the series, you're dealing with shinobi who are typically weaker than the 5 Kage, and you don't really eclipse their scaling until the war arc when characters are regularly eclipsing, Minato at that level left and right. As for why I placed KCM1 Naruto here, it makes sense. Minato believed that Naruto would need the power of the Nine Tails to go up against Obito, so it tracks that KCM1 Naruto would be at least somewhat in the same tier of power as Orange Mask Obito. Although it's very likely he was referring to KCM2 Naruto, who definitely scales above this version of Obito, because he fully mastered Kurama's power and as he had hoped. I do believe that KCM1 Naruto fits more comfortably in this gray area, in this tier of power. And since early EMS Sasuke is relative to this version of Naruto, I place him in this tier as well. And I do believe there have been some statements about early EMS Sasuke being relative to a prime alive Itachi, which is another reason why I'd put him in this gray area. But correct me if I'm wrong on that. But now that we've relatively scaled the Akatsuki top 3 for the purposes of this video, let's throw them against each other. You already know their powers and abilities, you watched the show or read the manga just like I did. These are 3 incredibly broken individuals. Having a dojutsu not named the Byakugan just instantly grants you access to some of the most terrifying jutsu in the Naruto universe. One wrong move against any of these 3 means certain death. Another thing these 3 have in common is that they all scale so much higher during the war arc. Like, it's actually insane how much of a difference there is. And I could do an entirely separate video discussing those versions of these characters from that one arc alone. But for this video, we're going to focus on their pre-war arc versions because I think this is where all 3 of them are the closest in terms of power, and it just makes it more interesting. Now let's start with Itachi. What makes Itachi so uniquely frightening is that he is one of the few rare shinobi in the series who truly exhibits the epitome of genius, talent, and ability, all at once. Not only does he have a wide range of insane hacks, one-shot kill abilities, he also has the IQ and battle IQ to pull them off effectively in combat. To put it bluntly, this man is basically Shikamaru with hands. Very scary, lethal hands. However, the most frustrating thing about scaling Itachi is that we never see what he's capable of at full power when he's truly bloodlusted. We all know he held back in the fight against Sasuke, and even as an Edo Tensei fighting Kabuto, he had to hold back. But based on feats alone, I think Itachi is capable of defeating Pain and Obito in battle. I'm speaking probabilistically, of course, and that there is a non-zero chance Itachi could defeat them. The question isn't, can Itachi beat Obito or Pain, because I think he could if circumstances favored him. The question is, if we had 100 randomized simulations, how many times would Itachi win the fight? I think all hypothetical Naruto fights should be thought about in this way because of all the variables, circumstances, and handicaps we have to consider. These battles can go 100 different ways, and we're just talking about which scenarios are most likely during those simulations. Itachi has one-shotted some of the strongest characters in the verse, even some characters stronger than him on paper, through misdirection and by having exceptional precision and timing. Under the right set of conditions, I'm convinced Itachi can defeat just about anyone if he plays his cards right, at least until we get into that insane god tier of powers characters at the end of Shippuden and Boruto have. Now, who would be the tougher opponent for Itachi? Surprisingly, I think Pain would. Just given Itachi's talents, abilities, and IQ, analyzing Kamui and finding a way to counter it just seems like the lesser of two incredibly difficult tasks for Itachi specifically. Compared with fighting against someone like Pain, who can easily outlast Itachi chakra-wise, and force him to overuse his strongest techniques just to keep up, I think Itachi would rather try his chances with Obito than Pain. But let me know what you guys think about that. Itachi is a prodigy, a genius, and a master of finding weaknesses or making one if none exists. Obito said it himself, that if Itachi knew everything about him, he'd be dead. He also was very thankful that he kept some secrets from Itachi. This kind of implies that Itachi has the means to kill Obito, and if he knew everything about him, he'd have a pretty good chance of pulling it off. It certainly wouldn't be the first Uchiha that Itachi killed. And if Konan, with prep time, can basically kill Obito, I have no doubt in my mind that Itachi could as well. But if Itachi were to clinch a victory here, it would be high to extreme difficulty in my opinion. Every time I think about Obito, I recall an interaction between Gaara and Kimimaro during their battle. Kimimaro said Gaara is nothing without his sand, but Gaara counters that as long as he has his sand, he can do anything. This is how I view Kamui. Obito isn't that impressive without Kamui, but with it, he is nearly impossible to defeat. And not only that, even if you do manage to land a killing blow on him, he always has that trusty Izanagi in his back pocket to rewrite reality. In some ways, this guy is harder to put down than Orochimaru, and that's saying something. However, Izanami is a hard counter to Izanagi, and if Itachi can successfully pull it off, I think a very realistic scenario in which Obito is forced to confront reality, instead of trying to enact the infinite Tsukuyomi, could play out, which I would consider an Itachi victory. But if it fails, Itachi would be down a Sharingan, and we can't forget the massive drain Itachi's techniques already put on his body and chakra reserves. With Obito having Hashirama cells amping him up, he can definitely outlast Itachi. This will be a battle of attrition on Obito's part. If he plays his cards right and plays it safe, he would have the overwhelming advantage. Ultimately, in a fight between Obito and Itachi, every second of the battle, every jutsu used is leading towards one of two options: Itachi running out of chakra, or Obito getting caught in one of Itachi's master strategies. But who do you guys think would win here? Obito or Itachi, and why? Now for Pain versus Itachi. Against Pain, I can see Itachi potentially getting a decisive win by going after Nagato directly. Maybe using his crows or a shadow clone to scope the area by seeing the chakra emissions with his Sharingan. But Nagato also has a potential counter to that with his Rainmaker jutsu, where he can sense everything within his rainfall. If Itachi gets close, he he could always try to change his location, but at a certain point, I think Itachi would catch up to him. Nagato also has to be careful to protect the Diva Path, because if he goes down, it's an instant Itachi victory. If he miscalculates and pulls Itachi in close using Universal Pull, Itachi can easily pierce him with the Totsuka Blade and finish off the rest of the Paths of Pain without fearing the most devastating of the Rinnegan's abilities coming from the Diva Path. But generally, against the 6 Paths of Pain, I struggle to see how Itachi handles some of the Rinnegan's stronger abilities, like the Planetary Devastation by himself if he fails to take Tendo Pain off the board. I have no doubt that Itachi will push Pain to his limits, but those limits are pretty vast. Itachi may have annihilated the Uchiha clan, along with Obito, but Pain took on almost the entire Leaf Village by himself and blew it up. He also defeated Sage Mode Naruto, took on the Nine Tails after the Sixth Tail emerged, trapped it within Planetary Devastation, and still had enough chakra to engage with Sage Mode Naruto after Minato restored the seal. He even, conceivably, had enough power to expand the Planetary Devastation prison when Kurama began digging himself out of it when the Eighth Tail emerged. While we never got to see Itachi's full potential because of his illness and him holding back throughout the series, Pain's full potential might have been even more frightening. We've also seen Nagato counter techniques like the Amaterasu with Almighty Push, and his ability to absorb ninjutsu will definitely be a thorn in Itachi's side. A battle between these two will be like overwhelming, versatile power versus the most lethal, precise, learned techniques. We've seen many fights in anime like this, and they can go either way. So tell me, who you guys think would win in a fight between Itachi and Pain, and how do you see it playing out? Now for Obito versus Pain, and this may be more interesting than you think. Conan had been studying Obito for years, so it's safe to assume that Nagato was as well, and that he knows the weaknesses of the Kamui. But knowing a weakness and being able to exploit it are two very different things. Nagato has some incredibly powerful jutsu at his disposal, like the Planetary Devastation and the Chaotic Almighty Push, but against someone like Obito, overwhelming power is virtually useless unless you have the ability to create an opening. And I don't think Pain has a jutsu in his arsenal that could exploit the weakness of Kamui. Also, Obito knows the various abilities of the Rinnegan. There's nothing Nagato could do that could potentially surprise him. Relentless offense is Pain's best bet here. And while the shared vision of the Rinnegan may be useful to an extent, Obito's Kamui works so fast that Pain would need to flood the battlefield with summons, heavy firepower, and other counter-offensives from the Paths of Pain to be able to hit him. And while that's certainly possible, the most realistic scenario is Obito taking down the Paths of Pain one by one until none of them are left. And with substantial knowledge of the Rinnegan, he would know who to target first. Even if some of the paths were to try attacking Obito from the Kamui dimension, in the same way Kakashi and Naruto did during the war arc, I sincerely doubt the chakra receivers could pick up on Nagato's chakra from the Kamui dimension. They may just immediately collapse or become immobile once they enter into that separate space. Another win condition for Obito is, just like Itachi, warping to Nagato's actual body by tracking the chakra being sent to the transmitters with his Sharingan. I do think Obito wins this pretty decisively, but if he lets his guard down for a second, or even underestimates Nagato like he did Conan, I can see one of Pain's jutsu doing considerable damage, or maybe even clinching him the victory, if he's able to pull off a soul extraction or something. Ultimately, it would take an incredible amount of luck and stupidity on Obito's part, and with the Izanagi, he has the luxury of making a fatal mistake and still being able to come back as if nothing happened. Ultimately, I think the best way to think about Obito versus Pain is through Minato's reaction to both of them when inside Naruto's consciousness. He acknowledges that Pain is strong, but ensures Naruto that Tobi was much more of a threat. It reminds me of the Super Buu versus Kid Buu debate in Dragon Ball Z. Super Buu is obviously more powerful given all the context, feats, and scaling we get, but Kid Buu is a much bigger direct threat and far more difficult to deal with for the Z fighters. But what do you guys think? Who would win in a fight between Obito and Pain? And how would that battle most likely play out in your opinion? So forgive me if you didn't get the most satisfying answer from me in terms of who's the most powerful in the Akatsuki. I think they're all pretty relative to each other and have the means to kill each other with the right combination of circumstance, luck, and probability. This might also be a situation similar to the Sannin, which were influenced by a slug, snake, frog variation of rock, paper, scissors. Essentially, it means that each member can counter one of the opposing members while being unable to defeat the other. Essentially, a three-way deadlock, but for the Akatsuki. But if you want my honest opinion, I feel most comfortable putting Obito at the top just because of how insanely broken Kamui is, and how difficult it is to deal with. I will put Pain under him because I think the scale of his jutsu is just too much for most people to handle. And Itachi is last only because he is severely handicapped by his illness. However, I do think a healthy Itachi going in with knowledge about Kamui or how the 6 paths of pain work might actually take the top spot. Like I said, the most frustrating part about scaling Itachi is that we never see his theoretical full power. But we have to deal with what we have instead of hypotheticals. The fact that he's still able to throw down with these heavyweights despite all that's working against him is still a remarkable feat. And like I said, I consider all of them to be very relative and capable of pulling off a win against each other depending on many circumstantial factors. But that does it for this video. Tell me, who do you guys think was truly the strongest member of the Akatsuki, based on feats, statements, or just your overall assessment of these characters? Leave your thoughts down below. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.